am recording this now.
I think I am recording. Wonderful. Okay, so I need to do get back here. I'm sorry. I've never tried Zooming while screen sharing. Here we go. I've got a PowerPoint here, and my guest who is going to join us in just a few minutes also has one, and we'll explain that when we get to it. But my book, Hidden Nature, came out last fall. And this talk I'm calling Weird Science, Old Geezers, Nasty Digs, Cute Critters, and a Lifelong Tag Addiction. And in a nutshell, that's what the book is about. But I'm going to speak this evening in two parts. The first part is the science. And some of you, if you were at last month's TCS meeting, saw a different version of the science part, but we're going to do it a little bit shorter for the Grotto meeting tonight. Mixing oil and water, a small weird place in a larger Tennessee cave system. And normally if you see something like is in this test tube on the right, that's Hal Love holding a water sample he took from a Tennessee cave, you immediately want to start forming an environmental coalition to find the dirty, rotten polluters who put all this oil in a cave. But that's not what's going on in this particular cave. There are no polluters involved. I've been, if you look at the little screen, here's a book I wrote over 20 years ago called Dark Life about unusual cave microbiology. And it's something that has fascinated me. Emily Davis is on this call actually, who runs Speleo Books. And for all you new cavers, you're gonna wanna look at her website for your caving books. Not only mine, but a lot of great ones long before mine. Anyway, she told me years ago about these science trips going on in Lechuguilla Cave. And I'd been in Lechuguilla on a couple of survey trips, which was wonderful, out in New Mexico, but I didn't know about the science. And Diana Northup, the scientist, was terribly excited about it, as well as Larry Mallory and some others I met out there. And they said it had to do with the cave's unusual mineralogy. And you can see in this passage on the screen now, there's a whole lot of gypsum. In places, every surface you touch is crystalline white with gypsum. And at about, I don't know, the mid 1980s, I guess, there was this rising theory that some caves are not formed by the familiar rainwater creating slightly acidic carbonic acid and cutting through limestone from above, but by much more acidic hot springs containing sulfuric acid and other acids rising from below. And these seem to have microbes involved in the chemistry that allows them to create cave passages, not only cave passages, but really unusual formations, which Lechuguilla is rightly famous for. This is the Chandelier Ballroom here, which I, at the point I first saw it in the mid 1990s, I've been caving since I was a college undergraduate in 1979. I'd never seen anything like that. And it turned out on the microbial trips, I was learning that these unusual formations are connected to very unusual microbial colonies that live within this cave and were unique to it. Diana later took me, along with Louise Hose and a couple of others, Penny Boston, another great microbiologist, to a cave in Villaluz, Mexico, where there are snotite formations. This cave, like Lechuguilla, is in an area known for oil production, for deep crude oil and hot springs. And this is a sulfuric spring, and it has actual gas vents of hydrogen sulfide that sometimes come up in the cave, giving the cave poisonous gas. We had to wear gas masks the whole time we were there and carry oxygen monitors. And yet there's an abundance of wildlife in the cave, more fish than I've ever seen in any one cave, more insects, lots of bats. And these snotites, they look like soda straws, but they're jelly-like, they sway in the wind. And each one is composed of thousands of separate species of fungi and bacteria, and a more ancient species called archaea, living together and producing those droplets on the tips of each formation has a pH of 0.0. This means it's about as acidic as the mouth of the alien in the Alien movies. It's carving caves all the time. And this is what we call hypogenic speleogenesis. And it's something that's been studied in a very few places in the world, certainly none east of the Mississippi until now. And that's a picture I saw on Facebook, on Joel Buckner's Facebook page, about almost 4 years ago now. And I write about it in the book, and I'm going to read just a real short passage. Well, the first description: it looked like someone had butchered a chicken on a boulder. Blood red liquid flowed around raised pebbles, centered in what appeared to be the yellowish remnants of past mayhem. Yet I knew at a glance that this colorful liquid did not indicate ghoulish rituals of some underground cult or anything done by human hands. It was not even a liquid. It was solid calcite that bled across that rock. And then skipping down a little, I recognized these bright colors closely associated with each other as often a sign of microbial dissolution of minerals. When it's bright red, there's probably some iron in some form or another in there. And reading one more line here: from the moment I stumbled upon the photo on Facebook, I knew I had to go there. And I knew I had to bring a microbial sampling kit when I did. Something strange, at least for a Tennessee cave, was growing in the dark, bleeding red and yellow over white limestone. I recognized a clue to a hidden universe. And so I started negotiating with Joel to go to the cave, and I said, "Can I go there?" And he said, "Well, there's a problem." And I said, "What's the problem?" He said, "Well, it's kind of a secret cave. We're still mapping. There's lots of passage. It's in the survey, but there's delicate landowner relations. And if a lot of people start showing up, the landowner's going to close the cave to everyone." So I said, "Yeah, but there's some good science there." So we talked about it, and it took probably 6 months to set it up. But eventually, members of the survey team who could lead us into the cave were going to, but we didn't go to this formation that made me want to go there. In the intermediate time before we set up the trip, new passages were being explored and photographed for the first time, mostly by Bob Biddix, who takes great photos of Tennessee caves. Bloodstone was what Joel called it. But in our emails, he started talking about things like hoodoos in tar balls. And these hoodoos I was familiar with, not tar balls. Anyway, it turns out that Secret Squirrel, which is incompletely explored still. In fact, there are new leads that have been found this year that are being pushed by Jim Fox and others. It extends over 12 miles, ongoing exploration. Secret Squirrel is a code name used to talk about the cave in public. And I promised if I wrote about it and if I did science there, that's the only name we would use. So if you cavers recognize it, well, yeah, you recognize it. If you don't recognize it, you'll have to talk to me privately to learn which cave it is. But it's really because of the landowner relations that it has to be so secretive. But we started a multi-year project focusing not on this big system, but on one tiny place within it. Because in one of the conversations, Joel mentioned, as I say, hoodoos. These are things we saw in Lechuguilla. I've never seen them in Tennessee, but Bob Biddix took this picture in Secret Squirrel. Chandeliers, just like Lechuguilla. Well, not just like, they're a lot smaller, but they're still chandeliers, which are unusual for Tennessee. A lot of gypsum in this cave. And he was mentioning tar balls. And he said they're in the petroleum passage. And I said, petroleum? He said, yeah, it's in a remote part of the cave. This is just a portion of the map. And if you can see that red circle in the upper left, it's a multi-level passageway with a stream passage at the bottommost level, which corresponds pretty closely to the valley you can see in the topo overlay or the LiDAR overlay. But this is a perched pool that is just above the mainstream passage. So it doesn't get much water in or out except in times of flood. And it's way below the hilltop that's above it. And there's nothing there. It's undeveloped land. There's no pipelines. There's no old storage tanks. There's no roads. There's no source of gas. And yet this is what they call the petroleum passage, because an extreme odor of gasoline or petroleum hits cavers when they walk into it. And you can see these black patches on the surface. And Joel was explaining that sometimes they erupt these things called tar balls. And whoops, I've gone too far. Let's see. Kaylee Wheelis is a member of the team that my colleague James Ingman, who's watching us tonight, put together to explain what the heck is happening there if we could get some collections. And she's going to give a very short version of the science report that she's already given As a group, this team has presented to several state, regional, and at least 2 national conferences, and the work has barely begun. It is really unusual from a scientific standpoint. So I'm going to let Kaylee talk here for 5 or 10 minutes, 10 minutes actually. Go ahead. If she can, you can go ahead and share screen. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Hi, I'm Kaylee. I'm one of 5 research students working with Dr. Ingman and Mr. Taylor in Secret Squirrel Cave. We even have matching t-shirts. And I'd like to thank y'all for the opportunity to present to you today. I'd like to begin by introducing the conditions on early Earth and 3 potential models for life on early Earth. So photosynthesis actually didn't originate until about 2.8 to 3.2 billion years ago, which means the world then looked very different from the world today, where today we have plants that take in carbon dioxide and water to produce glucose or energy. At this time, there were chemoautotrophs that broke down rocks and other chemicals to produce the energy necessary to support life. Most of these organisms actually died off with the arrival of photosynthesis, but a few are still found in unique environments around the world today. So the first example is a hot spring. Hot springs are commonly used as potential models for early Earth because the water is actually so hot that it creates an environment devoid of oxygen. And if you'll look over here on the right, you can see this hot spring here is actually banded by rings of colored sediment and water. And these areas are where the chemoautotrophs thrive. And we're gonna touch on that a little bit more later. It'll be important when it comes back to the cave. The second example for life on early Earth are deep sea hydrothermal vents. They're actually so far beneath the surface of the ocean that sunlight can't reach and photosynthesis can't occur. But if you look here, this is one of them, and it's covered in tiny organisms that are actually feeding on the chemoautotrophs that produce the energy and support the life there deep beneath the ocean. And we actually started studying deep sea hydrothermal vents and hot springs because of some of the bacteria and archaea that we found within Secret Squirrel Cave. Which brings us to our third example of life on early Earth, caves. So like Mr. Taylor said, most caves are formed by air, energy, fauna, and water carving out the cave system from above. However, a few unique cave systems are actually formed by water rising from deep beneath the earth and then microbes degrading compounds through redox reactions to form the cave system. And here is that gypsum chandelier similar to Lechuguilla that he pointed out earlier. These caves are actually devoid of photosynthesis, and a couple famous examples include Mobile, Lechuguilla, and Carlsbad Caverns. These hypogenic caves are also commonly used as models for potential life on Mars because subsurface Mars is protected from UV radiation, and it's one of the only places that we think life could occur. Which brings us to Secret Squirrel Cave. So the passage that we've been studying is the Petroleum Passage, and specifically we focused on these patches that form at the bottom of the pond. If you look here, this is one of the patches that the tar balls rise from, and it's actually banded by a ring of colored sand, very similar to those found in hot springs, and it was one of our most unique sample sites. On the left, you can actually see salamanders right here and here that are commonly associated with these sand bands. At first, we thought that the salamanders were feeding directly on the microorganisms within the sand bands, but now we believe that the salamanders are feeding on millipedes, isopods, and copepods that are feeding on the organisms present. So initial sampling was conducted on May 26th of 2019. At this time, 30 samples were collected from areas of microbial interest, including the tar balls, the water itself, and the sand bands, as well as a couple of different stalagmites and stalactites present. And then on the left here are our 5 water samples that we recently were taken by HaltLove. And this 4th one here is the first one we chose to process because of the petroleum appearance. So these samples were processed using a technique known as metagenomic sequencing. And basically what it does is it takes a sequence, a DNA sequence that's common in every organism known as 16S RNA. And that's actually used as a barcode. And that barcode is run through the BLAST database to see how much it matches known organisms, how similar their barcodes are. And then it gives us results based on their percentage match. And these are the ones that we've obtained. So using the metagenomic DNA sequencing technique to identify the bacteria in archaea present, we actually were able to identify about 593 different organisms. And some of those were able to degrade hydrocarbons or were dependent on the metabolism of sulfur and methane compounds. If you look over here on the right, the highest number of organisms unique to a sample were actually found in the yellow rings and the white ring, but the most biodiverse sample was actually found to be the yellow and white ring interface, which was expected because it had some of the organisms from the yellow ring and some of the organisms from the white ring, as well as several of its own that only live in that area. I'd like to point out a couple of different organisms on this chart. The Ardenticatenales, the Methanopyrales, and the Epsilon proteobacteria, specifically because they are either thermophilic or of hydrothermic origins. So it's not only interesting that we have bacteria found in deep sea hydrothermal vents in a cave in Tennessee, it's also interesting that they are thermophiles or heat lovers. And the cave itself is actually not hot. The water isn't hot. So we believe this is actually support for the idea that these organisms rose up with the water from deep within the earth and then were present in the sample after it cooled. And this was actually prepared for us by Dr. Eric Pollock. It's called gas chromatography mass spectrometry, and it is a technique to identify the compounds present in a petroleum sample. So each of these peaks actually identifies a single compound. And as you can see, these are actually very widespread and there are many different compounds. And this is what a normal petroleum sample looks like. But if you look at this petroleum sample that was processed from Secret Squirrel Cave, it's actually very concentrated here. There are less spikes and there are less compounds in general. So we believe this actually might be indicative of degradation of the petroleum sample by microorganisms within the cave. In the future, we'd like to conduct salamander and invertebrate identifications with the help of Dr. Matthew Niemiller. And then we'd like to quantify energy passage through trophic levels using isotopic analysis, basically just to determine the energy flow within the cave and who's eating who. And then we would like to analyze the gas emitted from the tar sands and be able to better understand the geology of the cave strata. And then the final one is we'd like to be able to document seasonal or other changes in the structure of the mini vents. The vents themselves actually move around the pond within the petroleum passage, and we'd like to be able to better understand why they do that. And then we also believe that there might be seasonal changes because of the salamanders and the millipedes. Sometimes when you go in the cave, it's been observed that there were very few salamanders or next to none. When they went to take the water sample, they actually said there were hundreds of salamanders and there were thousands of millipedes all over the walls within the cave, and that it was actually nearly impossible to get a water sample without collecting one of the salamanders themselves. And it's actually pretty interesting that these were this far within the cave because it's 1.5 miles from any natural entrance, and that's highly unusual for a normal cave system. So that is all I have. Thank y'all for your time. I'm gonna give it back to Mr. Taylor now.
Thank you, Kaylee. It's, you can see why I try to surround myself with people who know what they're talking about when it comes to science, because as a journalist and an enthusiast, I don't always know what I'm talking about. And, but this team, including Kaylee, is really on the ball. This is a picture here on the right. You know, the problem with having undergraduate team support is undergraduates graduate and become graduates. Quincy Gregg, who went on our collection trip in May is on the right there. He's in medical school now. And that's my son, Chris, on the left, who was actually not a microbial student, but an engineering student from UA, but I snuck him into the collection trip because he had done some before. And hi, Chris, he's watching us somewhere here. But I wanted to mention that hitchhiker that we mentioned, the little salamander. As you can see from Hal here, he's gathering a tarball sample in this picture, and this was earlier this year, well after the book was published. We keep finding new things in this pool. But once cavers walk into that clear water, it's no longer clear. It muddies up very quickly, as cave water typically does. So it gets harder to see where those bands are. When we mention collecting, except for the 5 water samples that were gathered in tubes like this, we just rubbed cotton swabs on things. You know, we weren't taking out formations or life or anything else. We were just swabbing them for their DNA, much as you'd get a swab for a COVID test shortly after our last trip. Anyway, you know, this is that oil picture that we saw. The tar balls bubble up and burst, and then they spread out like oil on water, basically. And we believe they're rising from great depths, and that the reason there's organisms in these samples that have been found only in deep Pacific hydrothermal vents. There's one that's a thermophilic organism associated with Lake Vostok in Antarctica, which is covered by kilometers of ice, but there are believed to be hot springs deep beneath it. We have one organism, that's the only other place its DNA barcode has been scanned anywhere on Earth, is in Antarctica from Middle Tennessee. So there's got to be some connection that's unusual for Tennessee. And we think it's because there's a fault that's letting this deep petroleum laden water rise up from a natural thermophilic hot spring that's buried somewhere. Anyway, the poor hitchhiker, you need a permit to collect a salamander anywhere in Tennessee. And we didn't have one. It was accidentally removed from the cave, from the pool at a time when, you know, Hal did say there were over 1,000 larval salamanders, which is incredible, in the cave, in that one pool. And so we called the Tennessee Department of Environmental Conservation, and they said, well, you can keep it and study it if you get it to a person with a salamander collection permit. And that's Matt Niemiller, who just had his first child and is owed some congratulations. But a little later in the summer, we're hoping to return with Matt to study not only the salamanders, but this entire food chain that seems to be subsisting off of the weird bugs. But now it's time for me to get on to part 2, if I'm going to fit my total 30 minutes for me and Kaylee both. Some of you may recognize this geezer on the left as Marion O. Smith, AKA the Goat, AKA Mose. This was a photo taken on a trip we were on in Rumbling Falls Cave in the year 2002. He was just a young lad of 59 then, and he's still dropping more pits than most of us in any given week. And to me, he's sort of the embodiment of tag caving, and that's why he appears in several different forms throughout the book as one of the main characters. But the book actually starts with my beginning at caving with a college cave club at Florida State University. That opening picture I had this guy, Alan Mosler, in Stevens Gap. And this is me right here with a goofy grin. And goofy grin is because that's my future wife, Kathy, standing there in front of me. We were on a college caving trip. I was 19 years old. This is Little River Canyon in northern Alabama, but we were caving that trip in some of the caves. Actually, on this trip, we went to Cedar Ridge Crystal Cave, which was one of the trips today. And one of the others, what were the other trips to? Well, it doesn't matter. But one of the other cave trips this weekend was a trip we went to for some of our first exposure to tag caving. In Florida, most of the caves are real small. You wiggle around. If you're lucky, you stand up once, and the rest of the time you're on your belly. So we were just blown away by these caves. And I started coming back as much as I could. Coming to these beautiful valleys and hiking and ridge walking with other cavers, looking for new caves, joining survey trips when I could. And this was in, my first trip there was in 79, and my first grotto trip was in 80. I joined the NSS in 81, just got my 40-year pin in the mail. And for my whole life since then, I've been going back to tag at least a couple of times a year, most every year, except for the year in the living room with COVID. This is my buddy Lee Pearson. another Florida caver from the Gainesville area, who actually, when I first went up to tag, he was in college at Tennessee Tech in Cookeville and was an active Cookeville caver, and took us to Xanadu and some of the other great caves of Middle Tennessee. And so he and I started, he got me, I had done vertical training with my cave club, but he got me really excited about doing pits. And soon we were doing pits everywhere, ridge walking, pushing little caves, having fun, going places like Neversink, which is sort of the iconic image of a cave in tag, one of my favorite places. And as I mentioned in the book, Nancy Allenback Holler was married in this cave. Marion Smith was married one of the times he was married in this cave, because it's a cathedral. It really is. And so getting back to Marion, he was a controversial figure for a while in the early 2000s. He had spent a lot of time with a big crew mapping this cave, Rumbling Falls. You can see the caver on rope in the rumble room rappelling to the top of this slope, and another caver here. And there's a 7-mile river at the base of a long hill beneath this slope that they had been exploring and keeping the cave secret until they found all the good stuff. But the cave was threatened with a sewage system that was going to be installed by the town of Spitzers, Tennessee, and dump sewage effluent into the valley that was the source of the river in this cave. So that began a massive conservation battle. And it gave me an excuse as a journalist to go there on a trip with Marion. This is one of the passages on that first trip I took in 2002, Gary's Chamber, and it had never been photographed before because Chris Anderson had to bring so many flash bulbs all this way into the cave to light it up. But it's indicative of all of the big rooms in this cave, which go on and on. And so I wrote about it in Sports Illustrated, which may seem an odd place, but back then at least they would devote an article at least every 3 or 4 issues to conservation and nature issues. And I got to do this one. And the subtitle kind of says it all, and I didn't write it, my editor did, but it still says it all, how a curmudgeonly caver discovered a subterranean wonder, infuriated an entire sport, and then rescued the cave from ruin. And that's one of the stories I tell in the book. Another one was my friend Lee and I went to visit a small, fairly well-known Tennessee cave, and this is not it in the picture, but it was on a farmer's land in 2014. And the farmer said, "You want to see my new sinkhole?" Which when a farmer says that, yes, you do want to see his new sinkhole. It was full of trash. A calf of his had fallen into it, and it took him a while to rescue the calf, but it was blowing like a hurricane. And it was very close to an imagined back door to Rumbling Falls Cave, which, long trips of 20, 30 hours were not uncommon to go deep into the cave and come back out the only known entrance. So a lot of people hoped to find another entrance. And so Lee and I were just there visiting, as we are always just tag tourists. So we got in touch with Alfred Crabtree and Jim Fox and this guy, Clinton Elmore, and started a kind of a long-term dig project, trying to enlarge this blowing little crack and see if maybe it went, anywhere near Rumbling Falls. Here's Joel Buckner, and I think that's Alfred. This is one of the ways we helped enlarge the crawlway inside. We were close enough to use a car battery for power source. They call that micro shaving. Very small bits of black powder put in a drill hole. And bit by bit, we enlarged the cave and got to several hundred feet of passage. Marion, of course, had to go check it out, see if it was the back door he was looking for. In the end, Troy Fuqua from Alabama found that back door, and it was revealed a couple of years ago at TCS. Mostly Marion would sit back while we continued to dig and haul dirt. And that was the farmer's dog who liked to watch us work too. But that's one of the stories I tell in the book. And then here's the last Marion story, a hobby of his and a couple of other Tennessee cavers has been studying Civil War signatures in Mammoth Cave National Park in Kentucky and in some other caves. And one chapter describes one of those trips where we identify soldiers of both the Confederacy and the Union who got some time off and were able to escape war by the pleasant activity of exploring caves. And what he does is he finds their names and then he researches them through old log books and historical sources and learns their life stories, some of which were very interesting. But I haven't always just followed Marianne around. I also am very interested in biology. I've written a lot on white nose syndrome. This little guy here is in a Tennessee cave demonstrating white nose syndrome in bats, which has killed over 6 million bats and devastated colonies throughout the Southeast and in some Western states now, shows no signs of stopping. Some populations it's wiped out 95%, although it looks like they are very, very slowly starting to come back. I've also been involved in helping cavers fight against development that's going to destroy caves. This is Butler Mountain, Alabama, north of Birmingham. And I read on Facebook last year that this area in red, which encompasses 2 mountains and about 25 caves, was going to be bought by a quarry company to turn it all into concrete for roads and bridges and whatnot, which I know we need, but not necessarily from caves. And so earlier this year, I wrote an opinion piece in the New York Times supporting the groups fighting not only quarries in Alabama, but also in Tennessee. And for now, both groups have been successful in not necessarily defeating the quarries, but holding them off for a few years because they always know the quarries companies will come back and try to do more. Anyway, that's the 30-minute mark, and I stayed within my promised 30 minutes. This is the same photo that's on the cover of the book, taken by Ryan Maurer, who's a great photographer as well. And the ugly pictures in here are mine. The great ones were by good photographers, just like the good sciencers by good scientists and science students like Kaylee. There were some people who pre-ordered copies that I was going to sell if I was there live in person. The gas scare and the broken bridge and the fact that our rental car was delayed because there's a rental car shortage nationally all kept me from being there this weekend. I hope to return to TAG soon, but if you want your book signed sooner than that, talk to Mickey, and she's got the books and she can send me your address and I'll send you a book plate that has a version of Never Sink Pit on it with an inscription for you, and you can stick that into the book. And for more information on getting my books, just go to my website, michaelraytaylor.com, and you can learn all about them there. And if the grotto doesn't mind and there's time, Kaylee and I both could take questions here for a few minutes.
Absolutely. Open floor, questions.
Get anyone?
Always have to give it a couple minutes.
I have one. I was wondering where Kaylee is in school doing this research.
You're muted, Kaylee. There you go.
I'm actually at Henderson State University.
I should have mentioned that. That's where I teach. And Dr. Ingman, who is here, is Kaylee's mentor and advisor and for this whole research team. He had done some cave studies in Arkansas at Blanchard Springs that I thought were really interesting. And since he's like a 3-minute walk from my office, when I started seeing this stuff on Secret Squirrel Cave, as we call it, and as the t-shirt proclaims, I went over to his office and said, you want to be involved in a fun cave project? And of course, he jumped in with both feet. So we have been slowly adding experienced cave researchers to this team. Ben Miller is going to be looking at some of the geology for us. And, we mentioned Matt and Eric Pollock, and there's a couple of others in the microbiology world who have been giving us advice. Actually, Diana Northup gave us some commentary early on with our very first sample from, I think it was 2018, as we were deciding if this was a site worth study. And now that we know it is, I think we're going to have a lot of undergraduates, graduate students, and scientists working with us in the future.
How do I get a t-shirt?
To get the t-shirt, you have to assist the science squad. There was a caver who was at the TCS meeting, and oh shoot, I can't think of his name because I don't know him, but he was there to push a vertical lead with Jim Fox. But since they helped collect the water sample, they get the t-shirts now. So we're hoping to do more collection trips later this summer. And if you hear through the grapevine that one is going and you want to try to come along and haul packs or something, you know, as long as we don't get a huge crowd, because the landowner doesn't like huge crowds, the more cavers, the better. You could also email Dr. Ingman and see if maybe as a fundraiser for the team, we could sell some secret squirrel shirts.
I don't know about my old age to be a mule, but I used to work with George Beatty before he started NICRA, or before he went there. So I am to help out in the water tracing. Either,
Okay, I'm sorry, I could only hear a little of that because you're too far from that computer microphone, but by the way, I'm in the members manual. If you're an NSS member, you can look me up and email me that way. I've got 2 email addresses, a university one, which is one I use every day, but I also have one associated with the book and the writing on my website. And I check that 2 or 3 times a week if you want to look me up on the website with follow-up questions. Any other questions?
Andy.
Just a comment. There's a few talk about some good chapters in here about Marion Smith, and if y'all are new to caving and have not met Marion, he's sitting right back here in the back row.
Hello, Marion. So how many things did I get wrong tonight? I hope fewer than 10.
I think most of it.
Yep. About the size of it.
Not because of you, because of too old to sleep at night.
Okay, well, and I heard there were several first-time cavers there today. You guys should go talk to that geezer back there, because he knows more about caving, which he remembers because his mind's like a steel trap, than most of us will ever learn. Any other questions? Well,
what species of salamander was it in those caves?
it was the common Tennessee cave salamander. Matt's pretty sure. I mean, he still hasn't got the sample because it was on ice in Hal's lab. Hal works at Vanderbilt University and has a lab there, and they were figuring out how best to transport it to Matt's lab so he could look at its stomach contents and begin to see, you know, who's eating what in that cave. But just from looking at the photograph in the Petri dish after he came out of the water sample, he's pretty sure it's just that the common Tennessee cave salamander, the bright orange one, which I've seen those near the entrance in the cave on the couple of trips that I've done. But this is a lot further in a cave in Tennessee than you would normally see this salamander. And it seems to be a breeding ground where all the young are hatching at this particular pool, probably because there's a lot of food for the little salamanders there. Any other questions? Well, thank you. It's been a lot of fun. I hope to meet you guys in person. I hope to be staying at Caver's Paradise. Is Maureen there this evening?
She is not here.
Well, she's on her way. She is in the book also. I talk about an expedition she led in Mexico that actually Marion was one of the lead pushers on, to a cave called Borbollon back in 1989.
That's a long time ago.
Yeah,
That's Dave's
it was.
about. She's taking
Oh, hey.
mom right now, so that's the reason
Okay.
I'm not here.
Mike, thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me. And thank you, Kaylee, for helping me out on the scientific side.
Thanks to all of our
So
guests.
long.
Have a good evening.
You too.
Okay, going back to my notes here. Okay, So one thing I've been very excited about adding to members' meeting agendas is tag traditions. In the last camp out meeting we were at, we heard about the tag version of the birthday song. Does anyone here know about an old tradition that we haven't talked about in a long time? Come on, Brad. I know you got something.
Actually, he's one of the very, very oldest Dogwood City Grotto members ever. So, can you think of anything from the late '60s that we used to do? I'll tell you what. Tell everybody how hard it was to get into the Dogwood City Grotto when it first started.
Well, I think I remember.
You remember everything else?
Well,
In 1966, just a couple weeks back.
Let's go get back.
Well, it depends on the viewpoint. So, to become a member of Dogwood City Grotto, you had to be voted as a member. You had to be voted 100% as a member. One person could knock you down if you could be a member. One of the founding members of Dogwood City Grotto, who I will not name right now, later got in ill favor with some of the others. In the early '70s, they wanted to be reinstated. And there's such high feeling that the guy who was a member of Dogwood City Grotto but lived in South Carolina drove over there just to vote no. And the original founder, one of the original founders, was not readmitted, which I think is pretty petty. But all
right.
Crazy times. And I think I was trying to remember what Kathy Mackey told me. So a photograph of the same process about 1980 would have been. I believe there was a structure similar to what was popular in Huntsville, and Andy probably helped me with this, but there was you had to do certain caves like fires.
Oh yeah, and you had to.
The body repel.
You had to get in and out of Byers Cave without using any rope at all.
And you had to demonstrate a body
That
repel.
was separate, yeah. But you had to be good enough cave that you. If you haven't been to Byers Cave, there's pretty much 3 or 4 pits along the way that are super, super slick. And please bring some rope with you.
Stuff there. Yeah.
I think it's kind of funny. I'm not remembering y'all's grotto, but I think it's kind of funny that y'all had restrictions and it wasn't money wise. You know, you had to actually do something. That's impressive.
They had to wash everybody's car.
You know what? I don't think we had to do
By the way,
it.
Byers Cave was actually not found by Fred Byers. Found by Ken Pennington, the founder of Old Rocky the Grotto. With whom I was on the ridge Tuesday this week.
Wow. So Ken's still kicking around?
He's kicking about as high as I am, which ain't very high, but he reached his ground.
That's good news. I'm glad to hear that.
Let's go to James E. Evil Yeoman.
Oh, really?
So
That's close enough.
I've always wondered about some of the earlier scuttlebutt that maybe you know about, maybe you don't, maybe before your comment. So what happened to the Atlanta Grotto, and why did the Dogwood City Grotto rise from the ashes of summer?
I don't know the politics of the beginning. The Atlanta, Georgia Grotto began in the mid-50s. They had a little publication. I have the original copies, the photocopies of every one of them, up to about 1974 when they found it. I think they just slowly quit caving and started drinking more. That's kind of a short summation, and also my opinion, not necessarily fact.
And we do have copies of all of the Atlanta, Georgia Grotto publications in our library, as well as the Dogwood City Grotto ones back to day 1 as well.
I've never seen that. I think maybe I've seen one excerpt from one of the Atlanta things that was quoted in the Dogwood City Grotto article, but I've never even seen that stuff.
Do you have a copy of the old J. Roy Chapman
Caves in Georgia, there was too many things put out in that 1948 or 58.
We have something, I think so, yes, I think.
It's kind of a basis of the, Georgia.
Meteorological survey. Yeah, that's probably worth mentioning. So,
I guess the first time we've ever contributed to it, but
if you're interested in knowing more about Georgia's specific caves, so Georgia doesn't have nearly as many caves as Tennessee or Alabama, but at the end of the day, we have the one that matters most. And I've built it. So I've always said. So I've always said it should be.
There's the Rickroll right there.
Said it should be GAT and not TAG, since we have the biggest, baddest cave there is, but hey, that's an argument for another night. But there are, I think, approaching 700 caves in Georgia now, and some of them are pretty cool, and they're finding more all the time. I know that there is really, honestly, ongoing exploration in the Johnson Crook area. Those guys are developing trail systems and coming across new caves all the time in that area.
well, there's one that we found that everyone should go visit. It's called Pike Fit Pit.
No.
Yeah.
Run away.
It's
Run away.
awesome.
Great
Great.
name.
I think you should, you haven't been there? Oh, come on, Marion, I found it.
Well, you need to leave me there.
Oh, absolutely.
So Leslie calls it Pike Fit Pit, but I called it Barter Pit. So that should tell you a little bit what the, like, it took me
Sound like I need
about
some
45
magic.
minutes
You'll
to get
fit.
out.
Oh,
You'll
God.
fit,
Well,
Marion.
well,
You'll bitch about it, but you'll fit.
But anyway, what I was talking,
What
what
in
I,
that 45 minutes?
What?
Like how, what was your rate of travel in that 45?
push,
Like a
wiggle,
millimeter?
readjust,
Fit too? You
push.
Absolutely.
No, it was awful. It was awful, and I have only myself to blame because
there's
I
another-
only made it big enough for me.
Another thing that we found that's actually a little nicer. Lot 41.
Yeah, lot 41K, but these and many other cave stories are in the GSS, the latest version of the GSS bulletin. And their meeting is coming up.
June 5th, I think.
June, yeah, and that's it. Are they having it at Bricks again? Oh, that's right, they are. Yeah, just like last year. And so the place I'm bragging about is where they're having the actual. And I think they're going to run a survey trip back to one of those caves to correct an error.
Lot 41.
So if you're interested in exploration in Georgia, then absolutely look into the GSS and go to their meetings and become a member and get a copy of the bulletin. They cover exploration in Georgia of caves. And I've always thought of Georgia as has a lot of potential, and people don't go there. So if you're looking for the out of the way places that people aren't killing every weekend trying to find stuff, it's going to be in Georgia.
Johnson's Crook especially. Right on. Thank you. All right, so now for our favorite part of the meeting. Who went caving? I'm not going to look at you, Mickey.
Oh, well, we went caving today. Where did we go? We went to Cedar Ridge Crystal. Thank you, Andy, for the key.
How was the walk?
Oh, rough. Yeah.
You had to walk 4 miles to get there, didn't you?
Yeah.
Uphill both ways.
Yeah,
So, but
in
that
the
was-
snow.
That was
They
actually
say you don't know how the weather
that was actually really fun. Some people actually went much further than I even thought that the cave had in it. Like, it's notoriously really short, but they kind of wiggled their way back to a room that was very pristine and had some beautiful cave bacon. I saw a video of it. I didn't go all the way back. And what else? What else was in the back room? Just the bacon.
It was pretty much like, oh yeah, the cute little mushroom slime on the floor, but nothing was broken off. Like, it was all still intact. It was white. It was beautiful. It was really pretty. I think it was glowstone. I'm not really sure what it was, but it did look like strips of bacon on the wall, and I'm kind of pictures if anybody's interested.
So then after that, we went to Bible Springs, which I had never been to before. So that was another tough walk, you know.
We're driving, wondering where is this place, and then like we drove. I looked out the window, and I just there's a big hole right there.
Well, and I did actually send everybody down the wrong hole because there's two holes right there next to each other, and I thought, oh, it's the bigger one. It's not. Spoiler, you got to go in the little crack on the left. But that was super cool. Everybody did really good, and everybody stayed pretty warm, except for nobody died. Nobody died. So that's what that's a really important thing. But yeah, it was really beautiful. We caught tons of those Tennessee Cape salamanders.
Oh, yeah.
Oh man, tons of them. So it was a good day. I'm glad that we made it happen. Yeah.
I know she's not the only one. Tell us about what you did, Mr. Secretary.
Okay, just a few days ago, I guess. Yeah. Man, I went to Ellison's and did fantastic. So that was awesome. First time going down, we went down the pit, went through the mountain, saw Incredible, tagged it, ran all the way back. So took lots of pictures. It was really, really cool, you know. But I was told to say there's lots of crawling, so you won't like it. Don't go. Don't go.
What was your climb out time? What he frogged out, just so you guys know.
26 minutes. I was stuck behind someone else though, so I couldn't go any faster.
What is it with you froggers anyway?
Tandem, you were stuck behind somebody?
I was stuck behind someone else. Can't go faster than the guy on top.
No doubt.
Not really. It was like a sprinkle down the bottom. I was dry. So it was great. Yeah.
Yeah, I've done that trip also. That'd probably be one of the highlights of my life. And Andy took.
That's cool. I want to go. I just can't imagine.
No, all the other pits, not fantastic. Those have been some interesting
Well, yeah, so
pits
that's
and-
bragging
and
back.
trips, too.
So I have the distinction of doing every route to the bottom cave except for Fantastic Pit and the Nostra.
Wait, you haven't done Fantastic?
Nope.
So you've done Smoky Drop?
Smoky 1, Smoky 2.
All in one?
All in one.
Wow.
What's the other one? New Pit, Nice Pit.
Yeah, okay. I was gonna,
And the Nostrop's the only one I've never done. And,
Yeah.
And just because I don't know how to approach it. But
Yeah, those are some of my feathers.
Chicken feathers left on a little ledge.
Yeah.
Feathers, right.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Oh,
So you do the ledge that Incredible, and that is what it is. I mean, that's scary enough. But you stay at the attic level and you do that little duck under, and you keep going across the top, and then pretty soon you come to the edge of a next pit thing. That pit is only about 50 feet deep.
Yeah.
And at the bottom of that pit is Smoky 2 on one side on the right and Smoky 1 on the left. But if you, at the top of that pit, if you stay at the top and continue on that ledge right there, so that's the ledge in question. And that ledge is only about this wide on average. And then right in the middle of it, there's a block that's falling out. So, you know, you're already over this 50-foot pit that's over a 500-foot pit. And so, you know, that's on your head. And you're crawling along, and then you get to this obstacle where this block is falling out of the little ceiling that you're in. You have to climb up and over this block and back down the other side. And I think we didn't we rig a line to help us or something?
Yeah, it might still be there.
And the joke of the day, and Leslie and I were two of the, I don't know how many there were, but there's maybe 6 people, something like that. And Leslie and I were some of the last 2. And we had watched everybody go across, and finally, I think it was Schwartz was with us, right? And Schwartz went across, and he was visibly shaken when he got to the other side, which is pretty on par for John. He was pretty dramatic. But he was visibly shaking when we got to the other side of that. And so this joke started about how he left chicken feathers all over the, you know, it's like, damn it, John, now we're going to have a really fun, we're going to slide off this thing because you left chicken feathers all over it. And then Ashley was a friend of ours, was on the trip, and she was extremely dry. Like she almost never she never complained about misery. She was a very stoic person. And she pipes up on the other side. No, actually, some of those chicken feathers are mine. That's and then on the other side of that is all in one. All in one.
Which I think Marion was the first one across that ledge, I think.
I think so. So you left some feathers? I was scared. And there's also a terrible step across, I think it's either nice fit or new fit. And Chris Green talked me across that, and that was like, there's nothing there.
Well, that's
But that there's more than fantastic in that cave that is definitely worth doing.
yeah,
So
new pit, nice pit's got that
take your
swing.
bravery badge with you.
I don't know if I have that.
No, you'll find out if you have it or not. You will have it, but you'll be like leaving your chicken feathers.
I did that little ledge around the edge of Fantastic, but that you can clip into. But if I couldn't clip in, I don't think I would have done it. Oh.
That's an older generation that did that without clipping in. I don't even know what to say.
I know, there wasn't a rope there the first time I went. It was, now, the ledge was dug out, obviously. I mean, it's yay wide or something, but it's this wide, but it's sloped down and a 586 foot pit is right there. And you're like, getting your legs swing out over it. So not to be,
He's just thinking about it.
It was a major sphincter tester with me with the traverse there.
Yeah.
That was intense.
It makes you consider a few things about life when you're crawling across that.
Sneak around.
Smoky and Charlie.
Bit nugget. Yeah, good. Thank you.
Yeah, appreciate that.
That was my life.
No, mine either. Never will be.
Who else went caving recently? Let's hear it.
No.
I went caving today. First of all, this morning we had the Alabama Cave Survey meeting, which was at Cathedral Cavern State Park in Alabama. A few of y'all were there. Had a good turnout, had some good presentations and stuff. And afterwards, a lot of us took a tour of Cathedral Caverns. If you have not been there, it is probably one of the biggest borehole caves in Alabama. It was well worth the trip. About an hour and a half long tour that's given by another caver. Beautiful cave, and I think in about 2003 or so, these two got married in Cathedral Cavern.
Aww.
It earned its name. That's
Aw.
beautiful. Beautiful place to be married.
Truly a beautiful cave. Like, I mean, you think, well, I want to do a tourist cave or whatever.
Well done.
It is amazing.
You actually go about 3,000 or 4,000 feet back into the cave. It's the way back in. Kind of near Scottsboro, if you're going to Guthrie Cave or something like that, it's on the same road.
So if Milton gives tours, is he working heavily with the state, or have they backed off of it? They built that really nice stuff.
The state park.
I know it is, but I was kind of wondering, how much they're promoting it. Do they still have like a ranger guy on site and all that?
I didn't see a ranger guy, but Milton is he's an employee. He's actually working for the park. At least part-time. He's about retired. And he enjoys his job. He'll give you a very nice trip.
Great. That's awesome. Well, yeah, it's absolutely one of the better decorated caves in fact. So find yourself down that way.
This place.
Yeah, it seems like it should be up in Tennessee in a big borehole.
Yeah, it looks like a Fall Creek Falls area cave. Yeah, it has like a very flat, smooth ceiling on parts of it.
That was the only cave my dad ever went.
Nothing to go
Very
for.
claustrophobic, and he had to go.
Oh, yeah? They had to choose one. That's not a bad choice.
Yeah, when Leslie and I got married there, so it had been, as he mentioned, some people's first cave in the 60s and whatnot as kids. It had been a state park or a commercial style cave for a long time, and then it was closed. By the time Andy and I started caving, it was closed. You really couldn't go to it. And then the state of Alabama just had opened it back up and built this fantastic, beautiful pavilion with giant logs, beautiful thing. And Leslie and I stopped by one weekend at the grand opening of it, and it was beautiful. We met the new park guy, was all brand new and awesome.
Yeah. Are y'all the only ones that ever got married there?
Oh, no, it's been.
We were the first people,
That's cool.
George.
but not the last.
Hey, boss. What's that?
Hey.
Maureen Handler, the Caver's Paradise belongs to Maureen Handler. Well,
Almost over.
we missed it. Yep. Well.
Yeah. But he meant he asked if he was. You're in the book.
Who else went caving?
I want to go.
I should have gone caving. I should. I might do some caving tomorrow. Okay, so
Did anybody on the internet go caving? Probably not. Because they would be here.
Mickey just asked a really good question. Did anyone online go caving? They are muted, but I didn't mute them. Got a thumbs up.
Is that Matt?
That is Matt Sewell, I
Hey,
believe.
Matt, what's up, buddy? Did you go caving? Can't hear you. Oh,
He
you
did go caving.
Unmute him.
I don't know if I can. It's not on hold.
I think meetings would go a lot smoother if you just keep everybody muted.
Can you hear me, Joe?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
I thought some other folks might be there that did the Limrock trip a few weeks ago.
Juliana.
We took some beginners there. Juliana, get her to speak up and tell us about it, Juliana.
The Limrock?
Yes.
Wow, it was great. We had a pretty large crowd. Limrock, I've never seen. I've never been like a really large borehole like that. So it was really cool to see how the stream kind of flowed along it. And what were those pools called? The ones that were kind of like the little ripples on the ground. I forgot about that.
Brimstone?
Rimstone. That was pretty rimstone, and that really cool waterfall coming out of the ceiling was pretty spectacular.
And the swim out.
Yeah.
The swim out was
Optional, but the optional swim out.
We had to do it. It
Yeah,
prepared
it
us
was
for today.
It was great. It was a really pretty trip for sure. I enjoyed it.
Who else online went caving?
Is it just those few people?
Seems like we've reached the end of that train.
Yeah.
Cool for the caving stories. Okay, so door prizes. I have 3 books that were redundant, donated from the DCG library. I've got Cavers, Caves, and Caving. I've got Caverns, Measureless to Man. And last but biggest, Back Underground in Indiana, a guidebook for the 2007 NSS National Convention. So all of these books are extremely hot items. And I passed out the door prize tickets. They each have a number on them.
You didn't? Here, take mine. It's lucky. I feel it.
Very generous. Okay, so I used a handy dandy pseudo random number generator. First off, we have lucky number 9.
Hey.
We have number 9. You can pick your prize. With apologies to the folks online, I handed out tickets here on site, but it was kind of hard to distribute over over Zoom,
Lucky dog.
but we are still very glad that you are here and with us.
What happened?
She got very
And excellent.
Well, maybe she could have got a baby, you know?
Okay.
I couldn't eat it.
El numero cuatro. Who's number 4? Kevin, measureless to me. I'll have to buy myself a copy of that one.
This is a real prize. Back underground in Indiana.
We have, drum roll please. Number 11.
No, I have 10. You gotta go.
We have one left.
Oh, well, there you go.
There you go. Congratulations. Good reading there. Don't use it to prop up the coffee table. That's wasted.
Well, that would have been your good home book.
You know, it would have been.
Yeah.
It would have been. All right.
That's like the best thing.
Cool.
So that's all that I have on the agenda. Is there anything else anyone needed to bring up?
I don't think so.
I don't think so. Are there any objections to the motion to adjourn?
Oh, wait, hang on. I do have something.
We have an objection.
Yeah, sorry. Okay, so, August 3rd is the, Dogwood City, auction. So, we have a lot of people that are very, generously donating some things. There's a few people that I still have to contact. But I'd also like maybe to do a bake sale. So if anybody is a good baker, or if you have, any items like camping gear or like anything that you would want to donate that you think somebody else might appreciate.
I'll donate beef jerky. I'll make a bunch of beef jerky.
Amazing, thank you.
Oh.
So yeah, just contact me. I'm on Facebook, or I can give you my number, my email address, or I'm on the Dogwood City website. But so yeah, I'm coordinating that. So please keep that in mind. And I think it's also going to be our first in-person meeting that's not a camp out. So that's kind of exciting.
When is it?
August 3rd?
August 3rd.
Have you contacted the NSX? They have books to donate.
Oh, no, I haven't. Thank you. Okay, perfect.
Nice.
And I think that's it.
Where is it at?
Well, so I haven't secured the location yet, but actually I can ask y'all's opinions if everybody's here. With the whole CDC thing now, where they're saying if you're vaccinated, you don't have to wear masks. I was going to try to rent a pavilion, but we could still meet at the back room of the REI now that things are much improved with COVID. Does anybody think that's a bad idea?
Have you asked REI?
No, I haven't. That's probably a good place to start.
Absolutely, ask them, because they were hesitant about a lot of things, so.
Okay, I'll start there and then we can go from there. Okay, oh, well, and one other thing, I'm helping out with the cave-in this year, and I'm trying to organize a parade. So Dogwood, what?
A cave parade?
Yeah, so it's sort of, the campground's sort of set up like this with a big loop that goes around like all the campsites. So I'm gonna get every grotto to decorate, actually Maureen, are you, it's Swanee that meets here, right?
Well, we meet a lot of places.
Okay, well, I don't think I've contacted anybody from Swanee, but I'd like each grotto to decorate, a truck or something, and just throw out some beads and candy for the kids, which we'll provide.
You mean for the cave-in?
Yeah. So maybe get your wheels turning about that, and if anybody has their pirate costumes and wants to be on the Dogwood City float or help decorate when we get that together, please let me know.
Brad has velvet tights and he likes to
it.
wear.
Yeah.
Your boots, the whole thing.
Oh, fantastic.
I have a cutlass and I have a tripod.
Oh, good thing you locked him down, because that sounds so enticing.
Yeah, we used to be rent fest people.
Thanks a lot.
I low key, I like rent fest though. That's fun.
Should be fun.
Yeah, it will, be, yeah. But I mean, the Renaissance Festival. Yeah. Okay, that's it.
That's it?
Yeah.
Okay, any objections to the motion? Wait,
I have just an announcement for everybody to let you know that Labor Day weekend, K-Fest is on this year.
Woo!
So we will be up here Labor Day weekend doing the Swanee Mountain Grotto thing, paddle trips, caving trips. What?
Labor Day.
And Saturday is our big auction. And we are also doing a caver yard sale. Which we have done years ago. We did it last year with our little mini event, and it actually went over really well. So if you have stuff that's just not auction worthy, boots, jeans, jackets, you know, small household appliances, just doesn't have to be caving. Anything that's left over, we donate to local thrift shops.
But see, I'm wearing one of their auction items. Yeah.
We get a lot of really cool stuff.
They
We
do have really cool
solicit
stuff.
a lot of corporate sponsors, so.
Awesome.
Nobody's saying it's, well, the lobby didn't burn down. Only the restaurant burned
I found it very amusing because that day I went to Swanee and towards Sherwood to do a fit. About 2:30 in the afternoon, I was just by the smokehouse. Got back to the house and down there in county and what's the evening meal? Smokehouse, I just went by there.
I haven't heard anything else, but my understanding is it did start in the kitchen.
I can believe
There was
that.
probably a police fire, got into the attic. The building's 60 years old or 50-something years old. And it just went up.
That part is all the stuff in their museum. A lot of people didn't
Well,
know.
the fire hydrant out front didn't work.
Oh.
The water company knew the fire hydrant didn't work. It was burning for 2 hours before somebody called the natural gas company. to turn off the
Wait a minute.
gas.
For 2 hours, it probably went out.
And if you drive past it, you'll see that the I guess the east end of the lodge charred. It caught fire a couple times. They were able to save it.
If it makes you feel any better, there's a virtual tour online. Pretty cool. You can, yes, like a Google Maps thing.
Why
You
would I
can
need
walk
that?
through
I've
the
been
place.
through it. I'm just saying that a lot of people didn't
You
know
know,
that
if
existed.
you feel like nostalgic, you can walk through it.
Jim Oliver was a big collector and had just a lot of
cool stuff.
Yeah.
any other announcements?
If you give us a minute, next time you say you motion for adjournment, we'll come up with something.
That's what I'm counting on. How about you make the motion this time?
Okay, I'll make a motion to adjourn. All right.
We're done. All right, everybody online, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you so much for being with us. I hope you all go caving in the very near future.
Very near future, oh no. Sinkhole collapses in the interstate 600.
What?
I mean, if they're gonna go caving in the very near future, sinkhole collapses on the road, and they go in, and they're caving. I hope that doesn't happen.
All right.
Joe, you want me to hold on to this?
What now?
You want me to hold on to these or?
Hold on to those, please.
To this hold. What? No. Okay, go get your stuff. Go.
This is a meeting of one now.